My ex came to the reunion a widow, and before I could even say hello, her friend leaned close and whispered the 7 words that changed my entire life. She'll lie. She practiced it in the car. My name is Wade Merritt. I'm 38 years old, a furniture restorer from Maple Hollow, Vermont. A man who fixes broken things for a living, but never learned how to fix the one thing that mattered. 12 years ago, Josie Albright was my whole world, my first love, my almost wife. But one icy night tore us apart, and she vanished from my life without a goodbye. Now here she was, walking into our 15-year high school reunion dressed in black, a widow at 37, beautiful, grieving, and hiding something. The whole gymnasium went silent when she entered, but nobody's heart stopped the way mine did. I wanted to run to her. I wanted to run from her. But before I could decide, her best friend Prissy Dunn appeared at my side, pressed a cup of punch into my hand, and whispered that warning into my ear. She'll lie, Wade. She rehearsed it in the car for 2 hours, word for word. Then she walked away and left me standing there with my heart pounding like a hammer. A widow doesn't practice a lie in a car for 2 hours unless the truth is dangerous. But dangerous to who? To her late husband's memory. Or to me? What was my ex rehearsing on that drive to the reunion? Why would a grieving widow need a script? And why did her friend, her own best friend, betray that secret to me? Of all people, the man Josie spent 12 years running from. I thought I was coming to a reunion, but I was walking into the one night that would unbury everything. The accident, the guilt, the goodbye we never had, and a dying man's final wish that would bring my ex back into my arms forever. Stay with me until the end, because the lie she practiced in that car was not what anyone expected. And the truth behind it will break your heart before it heals it. I almost didn't come tonight. That's the part nobody knows. 2 hours before the reunion, I was standing in my workshop in my dusty jeans, sanding the arm of an old maple chair, telling myself I had too much work to do. My assistant Ruby saw right through me. She's 62 years old, raised 4 boys, and doesn't have patience for cowards. Wade Merritt, she said, snatching the sandpaper out of my hand. You've restored every broken chair in this county. Tonight, you're going to go sit in that gymnasium and face the one thing you never fixed. She meant the town. She meant the whispers. She didn't know she meant Josie. Because here's the thing about Maple Hollow. It's a beautiful little town. Red barns, white church, maple trees that catch fire with color every October. But small towns have long memories. And for 12 years, whenever people looked at me, some of them still saw the boy behind the wheel on the night Caleb Albright died. Caleb, Josie's little brother, my best friend since 3rd grade. I need you to understand something before this night goes any further. It was February. Black ice on Route 9. I was driving him home from basketball practice like I'd done 100 times. I wasn't speeding, I wasn't texting. The police report said it clear as day. No fault. The truck hit the ice, spun, and wrapped around an oak tree, and Caleb was gone before the ambulance even got there. 19 years old. I walked away with a broken wrist and a scar above my eyebrow. That's the wound I've carried for 12 years. The unbearable math of it. Why did I walk away? Why him and not me? The town said accident. The police said accident. But grief doesn't read police reports. And when I stood at Caleb's funeral and saw Judge Roman Albright, Josie's father, look at me across his son's casket with eyes like 2 closed doors, I understood something. My face had become the last thing this family would ever associate with their boy. Every time they saw me, they would see that road, that ice, that tree. So 3 weeks later, I did the only thing I thought love could do. I left. Josie begged me to stay. She stood in the snow outside my apartment with her coat unbuttoned, mascara running down her face, and she pounded on my chest with both fists and said, "You don't get to decide this alone, Wade. You don't get to grieve for both of us." But I did. God forgive me, I did. I told her that every time she looked at me, she'd see her brother's empty chair at Thanksgiving. I told her love wasn't enough to survive that, and then I stopped answering her calls. All of them. 41 missed calls in 1 month. I counted them like a man counting his own sins. And I never picked up once. Because I was certain, with the arrogant certainty of a broken 26-year-old, that silence was mercy. She left Maple Hollow that spring, married a man named Harlan Pierce 2 years later, up in Burlington, and I came back to town eventually, opened my shop, and spent 12 years fixing broken furniture, because I couldn't fix anything else. Now do you understand what it did to me, watching her walk into that gymnasium tonight, dressed in widow's black? The gym smelled like floor wax and cheap punch and 15 years of dust. Paper lanterns hung from the basketball hoops. A banner read, "Welcome back, Maple Hollow Class of 2011. Somebody's playlist was stuck in our senior year. All those songs Josie and I used to sing badly in my truck with the windows down. And there she was, standing in the doorway like a held breath. The black dress, the silver in her dark hair, just a thread of it at the temple. The way she scanned the room, the way soldiers scan a field, and the way her eyes stopped when they found me. 1 second, 2. Then she looked away, and it hurt worse than the crash. That's when Prissy Dunn appeared beside me with her whisper and her punch, and her 7 words, "She'll lie." She practiced it in the car, and then she was gone, swallowed into the crowd, leaving me with a paper cup shaking in my hand. I want to tell you I played it cool. I didn't. I stood by the trophy case like a statue for 20 minutes, pretending to study a photograph of the 2010 basketball team, Caleb grinning in the front row, number 14, forever 19, while my whole body listened for her footsteps. And then I heard them. They never updated that photo wall, Josie said softly, beside me. Her voice, 12 years, and her voice still knew the exact shape of my heart. No, I managed. Some things this town keeps exactly the same. We stood there, both of us staring at Caleb's smile behind the glass, because looking at each other was too expensive. Up close, I could see what the black dress was hiding, how tired she was. Not sleepy tired, soul tired. The kind of tired I saw in my own mirror. "I heard about your husband," I said. "Josie, I'm so sorry." And that's when it happened. That's when I heard it. The thing Prissy warned me about. Josie straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and said in a voice as smooth and polished as a rehearsed toast, "Thank you. Harlan and I had a wonderful life together. 13 beautiful years. I was very, very happy. I'm only here tonight because Prissy dragged me. You know how she is. Word. 4. Word. I've spent 12 years restoring old furniture. And here's what the work teaches you. Everything beautiful is hiding something. You learn to run your thumb along the varnish and feel the crack underneath. You learn that the shinier the surface, the deeper the damage someone was trying to cover. And standing there, I read Josie Albright like a water-stained table. The word wonderful came out of her too fast, like a word memorized in a car with the heater running. Her eyes went up and to the left, reciting, not remembering. And her thumb. This is the detail that broke me. Her thumb was spinning an invisible wedding ring on a bare finger. Round and round. A hand that still remembered a weight it no longer carried. She was lying. Prissy was right. My beautiful, grieving, exhausted ex-fiancé had driven 2 hours to this reunion, rehearsing a speech about how happy she was. But why? Every instinct told me to nod, say something polite, and let her keep her armor. That's what I did 12 years ago. I let silence be mercy, and it cost me everything. So this time, but God help me, I didn't. "Josie," I said quietly, "why did you leave Maple Hollow without saying goodbye to me?" Her rehearsed smile flickered, like a light bulb about to die. "Excuse me? 12 years ago. You left. No goodbye. I've always wanted to ask you why." And then Josie Albright looked at me with something I never expected. Not grief, not guilt, rage. "Are you serious right now?" Her voice dropped low, shaking. "You're asking me why? Wade, you stopped answering my calls. 41 calls. I stood outside your apartment in the snow. I wrote you letters you never answered. And then," her voice cracked straight down the middle, "and then, you did the one thing I never believed you'd do." "What thing?" My heart was slamming. "Josie, what thing?" She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You know what you did. My father told me everything. You came to the house while I was at my grandmother's. You gave him back the ring. You told him, You told him you couldn't marry into a family that would always blame you. You didn't even have the courage to say it to my face. The gymnasium tilted. I heard the music, the laughter, the punch bowl ladle clinking, all of it suddenly far away, underwater, because I was hearing something impossible. Josie. My voice didn't sound like mine. I never went to your father's house. I never gave back that ring. She went white. That's not. He showed it to me. Wade. He had the ring. He had it in his hand. That's impossible. And then the floor fell out from under both of us at the same moment, because I said the words slowly, one at a time, so there could be no mistake. Josie, I never took back the ring, because I never had it. I mailed it to you. That April. To your address in Burlington. With a letter, 11 pages, begging you to wait for me until I could forgive myself. The package never came back. I thought, my throat closed. I thought you got it, and chose not to answer. I thought your silence was your answer. Silence. The loudest silence of my life. I watched 12 years rearrange themselves behind her eyes. The ring her father showed her. The letter she never received. The calls I never answered. And, wait, 41 calls? Because my phone had shown three missed calls, and then nothing, and I'd spent 12 years believing she gave up on me in 3 calls. Wade, she whispered, and her hand rose to her mouth. Who had your phone the month after the funeral? I felt the answer land in my stomach like a stone dropped down a well. My phone had been in a hospital bag, then in my mother's kitchen drawer, while I lay on her couch, sedated with grief. And who came to that kitchen twice that month, to check on the boy, Bible in hand, sorrow on his face? Judge Roman Albright, her father. Josie took a step back from me, then another. Her breath was coming fast and shallow, and around us, people were starting to glance over. And somewhere Prissy Dunn was watching, with her arms crossed, like a woman whose plan was working exactly on schedule. I have to go, Josie choked. I can't. Not here. Not in front of the whole town. Josie, wait. 12 years, Wade. Tears were sliding down her face now, ruining 2 hours of careful makeup, 2 hours of rehearsal, all of it. 12 years I hated you for a goodbye you never said. And you, she pressed her hand flat against my chest, right over my hammering heart, exactly where she used to pound her fists in the snow. You spent 12 years thinking I read 11 pages of your heart, and threw them away. She pulled her hand back like my chest had burned her, and she ran. Out the gymnasium doors, into the October night, black dress vanishing into the dark like the closing of a curtain. I stood there shaking, and that's when Prissy Dunn appeared at my elbow one last time, calm as Sunday morning, and said the sentence that would keep me awake until dawn. Don't chase her tonight, Wade. Come to the diner tomorrow, 7 a.m. She glanced at the doors Josie had fled through, and her voice dropped. The lie she practiced in the car, it wasn't about her marriage. That part was just the warm-up. There's a letter in her glove compartment she's been too scared to deliver for 8 months. And Wade, Prissy looked me dead in the eyes. It's addressed to you, in her dead husband's handwriting. I didn't sleep that night. Not 1 minute. I lay on my bed above the workshop, staring at the ceiling, while 12 years of my life reassembled themselves in the dark, like a puzzle someone had deliberately broken. 41 calls became 3. A returned ring became a mailed one. Her silence became his theft. And somewhere across town, in a glove compartment of a widow's car, a dead man's letter sat waiting with my name on it. At 6:50 the next morning, I walked into the Maple Hollow Diner with my hands shaking around nothing. Prissy Dunn was already there. Corner booth, 2 coffees ordered, sitting with the posture of a general who'd been planning this battle for months. Prissy runs the flower shop on Main Street. She did the flowers for Caleb's funeral 12 years ago. She did the flowers for Harlan Pierce's funeral 8 months ago. Some people in this town carry casseroles to grief. Prissy carries secrets. Sit down, Wade, she said, and don't interrupt me, because I've been rehearsing this speech longer than Josie rehearsed hers. I sat. First, she said, I owe you an apology, and I'm not going to give you one. I whispered that thing in your ear last night on purpose. If I'd walked up to you and said, Wade, honey, Josie still loves you and her daddy lied to you both, you'd have gotten polite, you'd have gotten careful, you'd have nodded and given her space, and let her drive back to Burlington on Sunday, and you two would have died strangers. She stirred her coffee without drinking it. But I know you, Wade Merritt. You've spent 12 years reading broken furniture, so I gave you a crack to look for, and you looked. Prissy, I said hoarsely. The letter. You said Harlan wrote me a letter. Her face changed then, and it softened into something that made my chest hurt. I'm going to tell you about Harlan Pierce, she said, because Josie can't yet, and because you've probably spent 12 years imagining him wrong. You pictured someone who erased you, some tall, easy man who made her forget. She shook her head slowly. Wade, I stood next to that man at his own wedding, and I watched him watch her, and I'm going to tell you what I saw. I saw a man who knew. Knew what? Knew he was the second verse of a song, written for somebody else. She let that sit in the diner's morning light. Harlan was a good man, kind, patient as rain. He ran a little bookstore in Burlington, fixed his neighbors' porches for free, remembered everyone's birthdays. And for 13 years he loved Josie with everything he had, knowing, the whole time, that a piece of her never unpacked its suitcase. She'd say your name in her sleep, Wade. Did you know that? Not often, but enough. And that man never once threw it at her. Not in one single fight, in 13 years. I looked down at my coffee because my eyes were burning. When the cancer came, Prissy went on, quieter now. It came fast, pancreatic. 4 months, diagnosis to funeral. And in that hospice, that man spent his last good week of strength writing letters. One to his sister, one to Josie, and one, she tapped the table once, softly, like tapping a coffin, to a furniture restorer in Maple Hollow, Vermont, that he never met in his life. He made Josie promise to deliver it by hand, made her swear on his hand, Wade, while she was holding it. That was 8 months ago. It's still in her glove compartment. She's driven to the edge of this town 4 times since spring and turned around every time. Why? It came out cracked. Why couldn't she just... Because delivering that letter means admitting out loud what she's never once said in 12 years, not even to me. Prissy leaned forward. And because a widow isn't supposed to want anything, Wade, that's the cage she's built. Her husband's been gone 8 months, and grief has rules in a town like this, and she's terrified that if she knocks on your door, the whole world, including her own heart, will call her a betrayer of a good man's memory. So instead she practiced a speech in a car. I was very, very happy. 2 hours of rehearsal, to protect a dead man's dignity and her own guilt. Prissy sat back. Now, she dropped her mother-in-law's rocking chair off at my shop this morning at 6 a.m., looking like she hadn't slept either. It's cracked down the back rail. She was going to ask me who could fix it. A small, sly, sad smile. I told her, there's only one man in this county who restores anything worth keeping. At 10 o'clock that morning, Josie Albright walked into my workshop, carrying a broken rocking chair, and neither of us pretended it was about the chair. She stood in the doorway with sawdust light falling all around her, holding that old maple rocker against her hip, and she said, "It was Harlan's mother's. She passed in the spring. The back rails cracked and I couldn't." Her voice wobbled. "I couldn't let it go to someone who wouldn't understand what it carried." I took it from her gently, ran my thumb along the split rail the way I always do, feeling the grain, feeling where it broke. "Clean crack," I said. "It didn't shatter. It just came apart along a line that was always there." I looked up at her. "That's fixable. Takes patience. You can't rush the glue, but when it's done right, the joint's stronger than the original wood." She heard everything I wasn't saying. Her eyes filled, and she looked away at my workbench, at the wall of clamps, at anything that wasn't me. "Can I stay while you work on it?" she asked. I don't want to be at my father's house." So began the strangest, most sacred week of my life. She came every day. Monday she sat on a stool in the corner while I cleaned the crack, and said almost nothing, and the silence between us wasn't empty. It was full, like a room where someone's about to speak. The workshop smelled of wood shavings and linseed oil, and the coffee she started bringing on Tuesday, 2 cups, mine black, because after 12 years she still remembered. And slowly, the way glue cures, the way trust cures, she started to talk. She told me about Burlington, about the bookstore with the bell over the door. She told me Harlan proposed at a poetry reading, and she said yes, because he was safe and warm and there, and because the man she actually prayed about had stopped answering his phone and given back her ring. Or so I believed, she added quietly, and we both let that ghost pass through the room. Wednesday, while I was working the glue into the rail with my fingertips, she said the thing I'll carry the rest of my life. I need you to understand something, Wade. I'm not going to sit here and tell you my marriage was a lie, because it wasn't. Harlan was, she pressed her lips together, steadied herself. Harlan was the kindest thing that ever happened to a broken girl. He built me back. 13 years of pancakes on Sundays, and his awful humming, and his hand on my back at every funeral, every Christmas, every hard thing. Her tears were falling freely now, and she didn't wipe them. But there's a room in every house that stays locked. And he knew I had one, and he never once rattled the door. He just lived in the rest of the house with me, gratefully. And Wade, being loved like that, by a man you can only love back with most of your heart, it doesn't feel wonderful. It feels like a debt you can never pay off. So yes, I practiced in the car. I practiced saying I was very, very happy. Because the true sentence, the real one, is unbearable to say out loud. What's the real one? I whispered. She looked at me, and 12 years stood up and left the room. And she said, I was very, very loved. And I spent 13 years asking God to forgive me for what I whispered in my sleep. I put down the glue brush. I walked over, and I did the only thing that made any sense. I didn't touch her, I didn't reach for her, I just sat down on the sawdust floor next to her stool, close enough that our shoulders almost spoke, and we stayed like that while the light moved across the workshop wall. But there was still a locked room in my house too, and Thursday morning I drove to it. Judge Roman Albright lives alone now, in the big white house on Orchard Lane. His wife passed 6 years ago. His son is a photograph. His daughter calls on Christmas. He answered the door in a cardigan, holding his reading glasses, and when he saw me on his porch, this man who once stared me down across a casket, he aged 10 years in 1 second, because he knew. The reunion was 2 nights past, and Maple Hollow talks, and he knew exactly why I was standing there. Wade. His voice was gravel. I suppose you'd better come in. I didn't move. Did you take her calls off my phone? That March. 41 calls, Judge. My phone showed 3. He closed his eyes. Did you tell her I returned the ring? Did you? My voice broke, and I let it. Did you intercept a package, sir? 11 pages. I put 11 pages in that box. For a long moment, the only sound was the porch wind chime, and then Judge Roman Albright, the most feared man in 3 counties, sat down slowly on his own front step, like a man whose spine had finally quit, and he told me everything. He'd deleted the calls while I lay sedated on my mother's couch, checking on the boy, with his Bible in his hand and his thumb on my phone. He'd signed for the package that April, told the postman he'd pass it along. He'd shown Josie the ring from the box and built the lie around it. You weren't supposed to know. None of it. Ever. I buried my son, he said, staring at his own hands. And I could not bury my hatred with him. The report said no fault. My head read it 100 times. But my heart needed a face, Wade. And yours was the one in the truck. So I told myself I was protecting her. I told myself a man marked by that road would drag my daughter back to it every day of her life. He looked up at me, and I swear to you, the doors behind his eyes were finally open, and what was behind them was ash. Instead, I took the last 12 years of her happiness and buried them next to my boy. I know what I am. I've known it every Christmas she didn't come home. Then he stood, went into the house, and came back carrying a wooden box. Cedar, the size of a family Bible. I couldn't destroy them, he said. God knows I tried to want to. He opened the lid. Inside, the ring, still in its velvet, still holding its small, stubborn shine. And beneath it, envelopes. My 11 pages, unopened, my handwriting from 12 years ago like a message from a drowned man. And under mine, others, her handwriting. 4 letters Josie had mailed to me that spring, to my mother's address, every one of them signed for by a helpful, grieving, poisonous family friend. "There's one more thing," the judge said, and his voice dropped to almost nothing. "The one on the bottom. That one's not from either of you." He couldn't look at me. "It came to this house 2 years ago. From Burlington. From him. Harlan Pierce wrote me a letter. Wade. And after you read what that man knew, and what he asked me to do, and what I was too much of a coward to answer," the judge's jaw trembled. "You'll understand why Prissy Dunn stopped speaking to me, and why that girl must never learn what her husband found out about her father before he died." I looked down at the bottom envelope, addressed to Judge Roman Albright in a stranger's careful hand, and every hair on my arm stood up. Because Harlan Pierce, the dying man in Burlington, had figured out the truth that took me 12 years to find. He'd known about the stolen letters. He'd known his whole marriage stood on another man's grave of lies. And he'd taken that knowledge into hospice, where he spent his last strong week writing 3 letters. One to his sister, one to his wife, and one, still sitting in a glove compartment across town, addressed to me. I drove home from the judge's house with that cedar box on my passenger seat, buckled in like a living thing. I want you to picture that. A grown man driving 15 miles an hour through his own hometown, one hand on the wheel, one hand resting on a wooden box, because inside it was every word Josie and I had ever tried to say to each other. Kidnapped for 12 years. Her letters to me, my 11 pages to her. The ring. And at the bottom, a dead man's letter to the judge that I had not opened, because some doors you don't walk through alone. I called her from the workshop. My hands were shaking so badly I misdialed twice. "Josie, can you come tonight? After dark." I looked at the box on my workbench, sitting in the lamplight next to her mother-in-law's rocking chair, glued and clamped and healing. "And Josie, bring what's in your glove compartment." The silence on the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, in a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from her, she said, "Prissy told you." "Yes. Wade, I've driven to your street 4 times. I always turn around." "I know," I said. "Don't turn around tonight." She came at 8. The workshop was warm and gold with lamplight, smelling of glue and cedar and fresh coffee, and outside the October wind was stripping the maples, and when she walked in, she was holding a white envelope against her chest with both hands, the way you hold something that's still beating. Then she saw the box on the workbench, and she stopped. "Wade, what is that?" "Sit down first," I said gently. "Please." She sat in the old armchair by my stove, and I knelt in front of her, opened the cedar lid, and watched Josie Albright's whole world crack open along a line that was always there. "The ring, first." She made a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. Not a sob, not a gasp, something older than both. Her hand hovered over the velvet without touching it, like touching it might wake her up from the last 12 years. Then the letters. Her own handwriting, staring back at her. 4 envelopes, sealed, stamped, mailed by a 25-year-old girl who waited every single day that spring for an answer. "He kept them," she whispered. "He kept them, Wade. 12 years. In his house, on the same street where I grew up." She looked up at me, and there was a war happening in her face. Rage and grief and horror and, underneath it all, buried alive but breathing, relief. Because a stolen love is a terrible thing to learn, but it is a resurrection compared to an abandoned one. We read them out loud to each other. That's what we did, and I'm not ashamed to tell you it took 2 hours and we did not get through them dry. She read mine, 11 pages from a broken boy in his mother's kitchen, begging her to wait, promising he'd learn to forgive himself if she'd just leave the porch light on. And I read hers. 4 letters that went from pleading, to angry, to grieving, to the last one, the short one, the one that ended, "I will stop writing now. But I want you to know that whoever you become, and whoever I become, some part of me will be sitting in your truck with the windows down, singing badly, forever." You're Josie. She was 25 when she wrote that. She was 37, sitting in my workshop, when she finally got to watch it be received. And then there was nothing left in the box, and the white envelope was still against her chest, and the room got very quiet. "Josie," I said softly, "it's time." "I know." But her hands didn't move. "Wade, once you read this, everything changes." He made me promise on his hand. His actual hand. And I've been so afraid. Not of what it says. I know what it says. I was there when he sealed it. I've been afraid of what it makes true. Her tears came quietly now. Because if I deliver this letter, then he's really gone, and I'm really here, and this is really happening, and I don't know if I'm allowed. Allowed, I repeated. To want anything. 8 months, Wade. It's been 8 months. What kind of woman buries a good, kind man in February and sits in another man's workshop in October with her heart doing this? She pressed her fist against her chest. What does that make me? And I heard Prissy's voice in my head. That's the cage she's built. And I understood that this moment, right here, was the actual restoration. Not the letters, not the ring. This, Josie. I took her fist, gently, and opened it flat against my palm, like unfolding paper. 13 years. That man loved you, knowing your heart had a locked room, and he never rattled the door. You told me that yourself. I steadied my voice. So maybe, before you decide what you're allowed to want, you should let him tell you himself. She looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then she put it in my hands. He wanted it read out loud, she whispered. He said, he made a joke. Even then, tubes in his arms. He made a joke. He said, make Wade read it out loud. Riss? I want to finally be in the room with the guy. So Harlan Pierce came into the room. I unsealed the envelope with my restoration knife, careful as scripture, and I read a dying man's handwriting out loud in the lamplight, and I'm going to give it to you the way it came, because it deserves nothing less. Dear Wade, you don't know me, but I've been married to you for 13 years. Don't panic, it's a joke. Josie will explain my humor. She never laughed at it either. My name is Harlan Pierce. I own a bookstore. I hum when I'm nervous. And by the time you read this, I'll be gone, which is the only reason I'm brave enough to write it. I knew on my honeymoon. I want you to know that, because it means you owe me nothing. She talked in her sleep, and it wasn't my name, and I did the math and married her anyway, gladly, and I'd do it again. Loving Josie with most of her heart was still better than everything else with all of it. That was my choice. I don't regret one day. But 2 years ago, I found her crying over a box of your old photographs, and she told me the whole story. The accident, the ring you supposedly returned, the calls that went dead. And Wade, I sell mystery novels for a living. The story didn't add up. A man doesn't write a girl's name into 13 years of sleep after coldly mailing back a ring. So I did some digging. I wrote to the county. I requested a copy of a 12-year-old accident report, the full one. The one with the coroner's addendum that grieving families never read past page 1. And I found 2 things. The first is about her father. I wrote to Judge Albright 2 years ago and told him I knew what he'd done. The phone, the ring, the letters. I asked him to confess to Josie while he was alive, to be forgiven. He never answered me, so I'm answering for him, the coward's way, from a place he can't argue with. Judge, because I know Josie will show you this letter one day. You stole 12 years. Don't steal one day more. Build something for them with your own hands. You'll know what, when the time comes. The second thing, Wade, is for you, and it is the entire reason this letter exists. So put down whatever you're leaning on. The coroner's addendum, page 4. Caleb's seatbelt was unbuckled at the moment of impact. His phone was found under the pedals, unlocked. A text half-typed to a girl named Amber. He unbuckled to reach for a dropped phone. Wade. 3 seconds before the ice. It's in the report. It's been in the report for 12 years. In a filing cabinet, while you built a prison out of a question. Why him and not me? Here's why, you thick-headed carpenter. Because you were wearing your seatbelt and he wasn't. That's the whole answer. There's no cosmic debt. There was never anything to forgive you for. The road knows it. The report knows it, and now you know it. So here is a dying man's final wish, and tradition says, you can't refuse me. Take care of my girl. Not out of guilt. I'll haunt you if it's guilt. Out of the things she says in her sleep. Fix her like you fix your furniture. Don't sand away the years I got to love her. I was there. I'm in the grain now. Let me stay. Just repair the crack her father made. Glue it patient and true. and know that if the joint is done right, it ends up stronger than the original wood. She taught me you say that. I'm holding you to it. Be happy, both of you. Loudly. That's an order. Your friend you never met, Harlan. P.S. Riss, you were not allowed to read this over his shoulder, but I know you did. Stop crying, go home, and leave the porch light on. It was always on for you. Now it's your turn to leave it on for someone else. The workshop was silent except for the stove and the wind. I don't know how long we sat there. I know that at some point the letter was on the workbench, and her hands were in mine, and we were both wrecked in the way that heals, the way a fever breaks. 12 years of guilt had just left my body through a coroner's addendum and a bookstore owner's kindness, and I felt light enough to float and heavy enough to finally stand still. And then Josie wiped her face, took one long shuddering breath, and looked at me with the first fully unlocked smile I'd seen since 2011. Ask me again, she said. Ask you what? The question. The trophy case question. Not the reunion one. The first one. From when we were 17 and you were sweating through your shirt. Her smile wobbled and held. I want to start from the beginning. All the way from the beginning. So I stood up. I put my hand against the workshop wall like it was the trophy case glass, and my voice cracked in the exact same place it cracked at 17, and I said, Josie Albright, can I take you to dinner? And 37-year-old Josie, in a widow's cardigan, with her husband's letter glowing on the workbench and her brother's ghost finally at peace, and 12 stolen years lying opened in a cedar box, laughed and cried in the same breath and gave me the words, yes. Finally, yes. 1 year later, autumn again, the maples on fire. If you drive down Main Street in Maple Hollow today, you'll see the old shop with a new sign, hand-carved, gold letters on oak, Merritt and Albright, Restorations. She runs the front room. She put a piano in the corner, and on Tuesday afternoons the whole street can hear the town kids plunking through their scales, and nobody complains, because this town has learned what silence costs. The rocking chair sits by the front window, not for sale, never for sale. The crack in the back rail is still visible if you know where to look. We didn't hide it. We filled it with gold-tinted resin, the old Japanese way, so the break itself became the most beautiful line in the wood. Customers ask about it every week. Josie always answers the same thing. That's not damage. That's history. Harlan's letter hangs on the workshop wall, framed in cedar from the box that once imprisoned our words. Some people think it's strange, keeping her late husband's letter above our workbench. Those people have never been loved by two good men in one lifetime. He asked to stay in the grain. He's in the grain. Prissy Dunn did our engagement toast last month, on the porch, in front of half the town. She raised her glass, waited for silence like the showwoman she is, and said, to the lie she practiced in the car, the worst performance of her life, thank God. Maple Hollow laughed so hard the porch boards shook. And at the edge of the yard, all through September, an old man in a cardigan came every morning with his sleeves rolled up. He didn't say much. He measured and cut and sanded, and his hands bled a little the first week because Judge's hands are soft, and he let them bleed. Roman Albright is building our wedding arbor. Every joint, every rail, alone, by hand, because a dying bookstore owner told him he'd know what to build when the time came. The first morning he showed up with his lumber, he stood at the property line, unable to step over it, until Josie walked out on the porch, looked at her father for a long, long moment, and then held the gate open. Forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't look like a speech. It looks like a gate held open, and a man allowed to sand in silence until his hands grow honest. The wedding is in 3 weeks, under his arbor, beside her piano, in front of Harlan's letter, with Caleb's photo from the trophy case sitting on the front chair. Number 14, forever 19, forever grinning at the two people who finally finished the conversation he never meant to interrupt. For 12 years, I restored broken things and told myself some damage can't be undone. I was wrong. Some things aren't ruined. They're just waiting. In a glove compartment, in a cedar box, in a locked room of a faithful heart, for someone patient enough to bring them home. So now I have to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it before you scroll away. Judge Albright stole 12 years out of love twisted into fear. Harlan spent 13 years loving a woman whose heart he knew was partly elsewhere, and called it the best thing that ever happened to him. And Josie practiced a lie in a car for 2 hours, not to deceive anyone, but to protect a good man's memory. Here's my question for you. Is it possible to love someone deeply and still lie to them, or lie for them? And the harder one, if someone stole years of your life, the way the judge did, but did it believing they were protecting you, could you ever hold the gate open for them? Would you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and the answers to this question always break my heart in the best way, because somebody down there is always holding a letter they haven't delivered yet. Maybe today's the day. If this story touched something in you, hit that like button and subscribe. And please, tap the notification bell and turn on all notifications, because stories like this one drop every week. And the next one? The next one is about a father who stood at a gate for 30 years. You don't want to miss it. Leave the porch light on for somebody tonight. You never know who's been driving to your street and turning around.